A new era of governance is here, predicted by those who govern themselves and to the dismay of those who lacked foresight. Risk management has become a necessity in ensuring that companies don't just stay afloat, but operate and adapt, knowing that any crisis would allow them to transform and not affect their sustainability. Around the world, businesses have taken into consideration the environmental, social, and governance principles as a critical consideration into their strategies. But the outliers outweigh the flexible, and this is no different in our own continent. Having the most diverse population, rich in natural resources, and exporting million tons of precious metals and commodities per year, it's time that Africa takes the forefront in leading the world in a new level of prosperity. However, many issues still persist on our continent, including poverty, crime, gender-based violence, corruption, the mismanagement of precious resources, and low corporate governance. As Africans, we need to recognize the value our continent can provide and evolve our business practices not just for wealth, but for the prosperity of societies and generations to come. Now, we have the tool that is built by Africans for Africa and the globe.
So the ESG GPS model is not just a one-size-fits-all. We want companies not just to go from good to great, but to be built to last. That's all about sustainability.
It has already started shaping companies to become inclusive of the ESG landscape in South Africa and Nigeria. And now, we look to Kenya to continue and progress Africa's drive towards sustainability and move Africa towards global alignment to net zero. This is ESG GPS Kenya. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Africa's drive towards sustainability, ESG GPS Kenya, the launch of Kenya's first ever artificial intelligence ESG rating model. My name is Tumisha Kope, and I am your host for today. ESG GPS is a rating tool based on data of all companies listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. ESG GPS ratings are based on big data, voluntary and mandatory disclosed information, news articles, and financial performances of the listed companies. Our ESG GPS's rich rating toolbox can provide companies, its stakeholders, asset managers, and regulators with a consistent view of a company's sustainability. This is all based on cutting-edge machine learning approach and is independent to serve people, prosperity, planet, and the principles of good governance. Our sophisticated model is that ESG GPS was developed by an African data science team led by Risk Insights chairperson and founder, Anushka Bogdanov. We are very proud at Risk Insights to bring you the launch of an ESG GPS ratings in Kenya, built by Africans, for Africa, and the globe. For today's agenda, we will begin our keynote speaker with Mr. Jeffrey Dundo from the Nairobi Securities Exchange. We will then have our welcome notes from Dr. Nkem Kumba, Chairman of Risk Insights Independent Ratification Committee for Kenya. The cadence of ESG GPS's model will be presented by Interim CEO and Principal of Risk Insights, Mr. Andrei Bogdanov, and the Head of Data Science Lab of Risk Insights, Dr. Abubaida Shabat. Next will be the Head of Data Analytics at Rand Merchant Bank, Mr. Matthew Bernoth, followed by a panel of thought leaders answering questions regarding ESG. Last, but certainly not least, we will have Ms. Suzanne Ellers, CEO of the Malala Fund, to close our event. With that, I am pleased to welcome our prestigious keynote speaker, Mr. Jeffrey Dundo, Chief Executive of the Nairobi Securities Exchange PLC. Mr. Dundo was appointed Chief Executive of the NSE on March 3, 2015, and is an accomplished investment banker in the financial services sector for the last 28 years, 22 of which have been in the capital markets. For today, Mr. Dundo will share his insights on the current state of sustainability in Kenya and how ESG is being integrated into Kenya and the stakeholders of the Securities Exchange. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Dundo.
Anushka Bogdanov, Founder and Chair, Risk Insights. Andrei Bogdanov, Principal and Interim CEO, Risk Insights. My fellow speakers, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very delighted to be making this presentation today on the launch of the Risk Insights ESG tool. And for us as the NSC, we think it's quite a privilege and very timely, given the new phenomena and appreciation of ESG as a key lever and driver of strength in businesses in Kenya. So the interests of investors and other corporate stakeholders in environmental, social, and governance, ESG, matters has surged in the recent past, with the modern investor in the capital markets being more discerning and demands more disclosures from companies. Therefore, with the advent of the COVID-19 crisis, the attendant economic and social crisis, interest in human rights practices by companies, public health, green energy, has intensified the focus in sustainability and its reporting. The Nairobi Securities Exchange believes that Matters ESG provide a tool through which investors, owners of capital, and the public at large have a comprehensive view of the company's activities and performance. The ESG market has registered phenomenal growth over the last few years, with assets under management factoring in ESG principles projected to reach $45 trillion, and ESG dedicated funds surpassing the $1 trillion mark by 2020-2021. Socially responsible and exchange-traded funds, ETFs, have also seen growth with increased focus from investors and issuers. The growth is to a large extent driven by increased regulation, market incentives, and shareholder activism. ESG integration and disclosure is increasingly being mandated across the globe. In Kenya, we have the Code of Corporate Governance Practices for Issuers of Securities to the Public, issued by the Capital Markets Authority, and the NSC ESG Disclosure Guidelines, which are due to be launched this quarter. For the capital markets, the increased accountability and transparency helps build trust and confidence in businesses and the market, and thus attracting the attention of a growing body of socially responsible investors. The COVID-19 pandemic has heightened calls for investors to embed responsible investment principles in their decision-making and for countries to reset their economies towards more sustainable trajectories. Ladies and gentlemen, an inclusive green economy is one that improves human well-being and builds social equity while reducing environmental risks and scarcities. An inclusive green economy is an alternative to the today's dominant economic model, which intensifies inequalities, encourages waste, triggers resource scarcities, and generates widespread threats to the environment and human health. Over the past decade, the concept of the green economy has emerged as a strategic priority for many governments and the private sector. By transforming their economies into drivers of sustainability, governments and corporates will be primed to take on the major challenge of the 21st century, from urbanization and resource scarcity to climate change and economic volatility. Following the launch of our green bond market in 2019, Acorn Holdings, a property company in Kenya, successfully issued and listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange and the London Stock Exchange, Kenya's first green bond. The bond was greatly subscribed, attaining a subscription rate of 85% and raising 4.3 billion Kenyan shillings. We are very encouraged by the positive response from the market and are working closely with the government to issue Kenya's first sovereign green bond. This bond has done immensely well and has also attracted a large number of pension funds into its subsequent secondary trading. This will encourage mobilization of domestic and international capital that is earmarked to finance or refinance projects which generate climate or environmental benefits. Listed companies can thus raise the capital that's aimed at supporting sustainable projects through the Nairobi Securities Exchange. We are aware that we are strategically placed to make a significant positive contribution to the society by proactively working with our customers, regulators, civil society, investors, and other stakeholders. By doing all this, we will deliver positive change for our local and regional economies, and indeed, Africa at large. We wish to recognize Risk Insights for its role in creating the country's first artificial intelligence and machine learning rating tool that uses AI to process unstructured data with structured financial information to provide ESG ratings to the listing corporates. We look forward to hearing more about the platform and encourage issuers and investors to familiarize themselves with this tool. Thank you, and my best wishes for this particular day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Udundo, for helping lead Kenya into carbon neutrality by supporting the capital market stakeholders. Kenya is one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. The performance of the economy has been boosted by a stable macroeconomic environment, investor confidence, and a resilient services sector. Speaking on these topics, I would like to introduce our chairman for Risk Insights Independent Ratification Committee for Kenya, Dr. Nkem Kumba. Prior to joining the faculty of the University of Michigan, Dr. Kumba was an assistant professor of mathematics at North Georgia College and State University. He also held research fellowship at Institute for Pure and Applied Mathematics at UCLA and the Mathematical Science Research Institute at the University of California at Berkeley. Dr. Kumba is also the chairman of the Africa Development Futures Group. For today, Dr. Kumba will cover the importance of ESG for Kenya, the impact of ESG GPS for Kenya and the capital markets, and how ESG GPS can be used by policymakers, ensuring public and private sectors can work together to make Africa a better place for Africans. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Kumba.
Dear members of Kenya's political and policy leadership, dear members of Kenya's corporate and industrial leadership, dear Kenyan civil society, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. In my capacity as chairman of Risk Insights International Ratings Committee for its ESG for Kenya, it is my singular pleasure and honor to welcome you all to this momentous launch of Risk Insights ESG GPS solution for Kenya. In the last several years, Kenya has been one of Africa's economic powerhouses, as reflected in its economic growth indicators. It has discovered substantive amounts of natural resources, including minerals and oil, that, complemented by its current industrial output, provide substantive optimism for its economic prospects. However, like its African peers, concerns about Kenya's ability to harness its natural resources and economic indicators to provide broad-based economic upliftment to its people has been a concern. We see the case in neighboring Congo or the Central African sub-region, where abundance of natural resources has not meant any improvement in the lot of its citizenry. It was Africa's own Kofi Annan, while Secretary General of the United Nations, who brought to fore the notion of ESG as a paradigm that can provide more substantive responsiveness by the dominant economic actors to the economies of less developed nations. Prior to that, Kenya, for example, in the 60s and 70s, had recorded high numbers in the economic growth, and many other countries in Africa did the same. And those economic growth numbers were framed from the dominant notions of GDP as measures of economic performance. By developing economic performance indicators that better reflect and respond to its own material reality, its own material conditions in country, like its governance, culture, and structures and institutions, its corporate sector and capital markets, its civil society and human capital. By responding better to Kenyan citizens' own aspirations to see more shared prosperity in its economic activity, by better responding to Kenya's own aspirations to develop sustainable economic growth that does not fluctuate in response to exogenous activity. Kenya will be better positioned to harness its upcoming youth bulge, its entry into the African Continental Free Trade Area, to show leadership as it has always done in the last 60 years post-independence, that Africa can perform better, that our resources can benefit its people, and that its neighbors can copy a good example right there in their neighborhood. Risk Insights has developed an empirical solution that better captures Africa's own material environment. It is an African solution by Africans for African markets. We believe that this solution, if appropriately deployed by Kenyan policy and corporate leadership, would provide it with the necessary tools to better embed its policy and its ratings of its corporate sector, as well as its public sector, within the aspirations of Kenyans themselves. Risk Insights has developed an ESG ratings tool that rates African economic performance based on its own empirical data. It enhances transparency both in the public and private sectors and enables both of these two sectors to better work together to make sure that their economies better reflect the aspirations of its citizenry and the wealth of the countries is better shared. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Kumba, for the powerful address on growth in Kenya and how ESG GPS's rating tool will be a useful component between both the public and private sectors. Investors are increasingly applying these unstructured data of ESG as part of their assessment process to identify material risks and growth opportunities. So, the stakes are high when it comes to compliance and regulations. Adopting an ESG approach can be difficult, but with the numerous ESG disclosure frameworks and rating tools, how does a company know how to navigate this? Moreover, how can a company measure its impact to monitor and adjust their ESG strategies and remain competitive? While there are a number of ESG rating models, ESG GPS is the first and only model that takes into account a country's bespoke laws, regulations, best practices, and combines those with global principles. ESG GPS is revolutionary in its approach to gather information, interpret big data, and produce ratings that reflect the sustainability of a company in a consistent and transparent manner. To tell you more about the cadence of ESG GPS model, we have Mr. Andrei Bogdanov, Interim CEO and Principal, and Dr. Abubaida Shabat, the head of the Data Science Lab from Risk Insights. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Bogdanov and Dr. Shabat.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to ESG GPS Launch Kenya. My name is Andrei Bogdanov. I'm Interim CEO of Risk Insights.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Abubaida Shabat, and I have the absolute privilege of being the head of Data Lab here at Risk Insights.
ESG GPS rating tool is the first in the world to rate the entire Nairobi Securities Exchange. Can you believe in that, Abubaida?
I certainly can, Andre. I'm quite excited about the perspective of ESG GPS for Africa, because ESG is all about safeguarding the future for us, our community, and the generation to come.
All 66 counters from 2018 to 2021 are rated. It must be about 200 counters altogether, Abubaida? GPS also rates small, medium, and large caps. Asset managers, financial institutions, and regulators are looking at the listed companies from the very granular perspectives in terms of the ESG disclosure and sustainability. With the world moving towards carbon neutrality, to protect the planet, measuring environmental impact is key to company strategies.
But Andre, what does that mean for stakeholders, the people, and for the country?
Well, it supports an increased impact investing and capital inflows into the country, and Kenya will gain a competitive advantage. So, can you tell us a little more about ESG GPS, Abubaida?
I certainly can, and let's dive into it. The ESG model is a rating system which uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data. Most people are familiar with these buzzwords, but I will define them in a context of the model for clarity. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is the simulation of a human intelligence in computers or machines that are programmed to think like humans and mimic their actions. In turn, machine learning is a particular application of AI involving the development of computer programs that can access data and use it to learn for themselves. The key concept in machine learning is programs or algorithms that can learn from themselves and come up with solutions without being explicitly programmed. This has far-reaching application in our model. Lastly, big data by definition is the analysis and systematic extraction of information from large and complex data sets.
So, Abu Baida, the ESG GPS model does incorporate it all.
It does indeed, Andre. The ESG GPS model uses artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms to analyze large and complex data sets and produce meaningful output from the data. During the course of this presentation, I will explain how we apply these technologies to solve problems presented in our dataset.
But Abu Baida, this is not the only thing that makes the ESG GPS model unique. ESG GPS is the only model that rates the entire stock exchange, small, mid, and large caps, on ESG factors. Other ESG models only rate a subset of an exchange, typically only the large and mid caps. However, ESG is a must-have for all companies irrespective of the market cap. Issues such as global warming, climate change, equality, and inclusivity affect everyone.
Well, I agree, Andre. Another advantage that we have over our competitors is that other ESG models are based on simple logistic or linear regression approach, where companies fill out actual questionnaires and the quantitative data from the questionnaires form a set of independent variables that are regressed against a dependent variable. On the other hand, the ESG GPS model uses advanced machine learning approaches, including neural networks and regression trees. These advanced machine learning approaches have three advantages over logistic or linear regression modeling: flexibility, power, and performance. So, Andre, let's dive into the ESG GPS rating process in a lot more details. As an introduction, the operation of the Risk Insight ESG GPS model comes down to the following. ESG GPS model uses AI and machine learning to gather data in the public domain for a listed company and subsequently transform this data into an ESG rating. The publicly disclosed data inputted to our process include unstructured quantitative data in the form of a company publicly disclosed reports, policies, characters, guidelines, as well as the news feeds on the company related to the ESG factor.
So, Abu Baida, what about news feeds? Are we taking into account sentiment analysis as well?
We certainly do, Andre. The negative news feeds form part of our unstructured data input to the ESG model. Here we look at the news feed from credible financial news sources. The news feeds make an important contribution to a company rating because ESG issues such as non-compliance with environment protections law and even accounting or corporate governance issues do come out in the news. And the goal here is for a company rating to reflect what is happening in actuality as much as possible. The input to our model also include quantitative or structured data. Here we look at the company's financial year end reporting, market cap, as well as the average share price return and trailing PE ratio for the financial year. We gather this data and put it into one process to generate rating for the company. This entire process, including the data collection phase, is automated from end to end and underpinned by artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. So, Andre, I put more details on the cadence of the ESG GPS model. Our rating process is a 5-step process, involving data collections and subsequent application of AI algorithms and processing to yield an ESG rating. Calibration of a company public disclosed document into a disclosure score is based on TF-IDF, an age-old information retrieval statistic that has been around since the 70s. TF-IDF measures the importance of a word in a document or a collection of documents, TF-IDF is used in most modern search engines, including Google. TF-IDF contains two steps. The first one is, term frequency, which basically measure how frequent a term occurs in a document. Now, in the inverse document frequency, which is the second, measure how important a term is. TF-IDF is considered all the terms to be equally important. However, certain terms such as is, of, and that may appear a lot of times but have a little importance. Hence, we weight down the frequency term while scaling up the rare ones. Step 1 is data collection, and I have already spoken about some of the data that we look at it. In addition to this, we have a library of keywords that we use to calibrate companies according to ESG. Our keyword comes from international reporting and sustainability frameworks. Our keyword also come from the law of the land, and I should mention here that what is unique about our model is that we calibrate companies according to keywords that are country specific. Step 2 and 3 relates to our artificial intelligence algorithm and pre-processing. Here we use natural language processing and context analysis to quantify the ESG disclosure for a company. In step 4, we combine the disclosure score with a financial matrix, including the PE ratio, the share price movement, as well as the market capitalization for the company to end up with an ESG rating between 1 and 4, with 4 being the highest rating.
So, Abu Baida, with all the computers and all of the artificial intelligence, is there any space for human being, for human intervention?
There is, absolutely, Andrew. Step 5 in our process is ratification, where we have an independent ratification committee, which is an overreaching governance body that applies their expert market knowledge to make recommendation on any changes that need to be made to the rating. This step is important because although our methodology is sound, the element of expert human knowledge is a key in validation the rating produced.
Abu Baida, thank you very much for this summary. So, there you have it. The ESG GPS model built by Africans for Africa and the world. The product range includes several reports, from sentimental analysis to comprehensive disclosures, and from scores of companies to strategic business intelligence reports. There is no cyber risk, there is no API costs. All you need is a username, password, and subscription, and you will be able to access the platform. By subscribing, you have access to a world-class data science team to navigate your journey to sustainability.
Thank you, Mr. Bogdanov and Dr. Shabbat. As you can see, the ESG GPS rating tool is years ahead of the game, providing material, consistent, and transparent data for all stakeholders about the company's ESG performance. It is simple and elegant, yet very mathematically sophisticated tool of the 21st century and the digital revolution. With the globe moving into the digital space exponentially and data science increase, providing insights and new ways of reaching customers and doing business, we are pleased at Risk Insights to introduce Mr. Matthew Bernoth from Rand Merchant Bank as our next speaker. Mr. Bernoth is an experienced entrepreneur, data analytics leader, and a CFA charter holder with a love for finance, data analytics, and building businesses. For today, Mr. Bernoth will highlight how African entrepreneurs can use data analytics and how this can become an opportunity of a lifetime. The financial services sector is increasingly supporting institutions to grow in the digital space. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Bernoth.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew Bernoth. I'm the head of data analytics at Rand Merchant Bank. And today I'm going to be speaking about 3 things that when they come together present African entrepreneurs with an unprecedented opportunity to build data analytics and AI-based companies that can not only service Africa, but can service the globe. Today I'm going to be speaking about 3 elements. Firstly, I'm going to be speaking about the power of unscaling and how African entrepreneurs today can rent computing power and computing storage that was previously only available to the largest companies in the world. I'm going to be speaking about how African entrepreneurs should take advantage of data analytics and AI opportunities across the data analytics value chain. And I'm going to be speaking about how African entrepreneurs need to compete as exponential organizations, and why we need to be 10 times better, 10 times cheaper, and 10 times faster than the organizations that we compete with globally. I hope that today's presentation will give African entrepreneurs every encouragement and belief that they can build the company of their dreams by taking advantage of only a laptop and an internet connection. Firstly, I'm going to be speaking about unscaling. This comes from a book by Hemant Taneja, and he speaks about how AI and a new generation of upstarts are transforming the economy by renting economies of scale, by renting computing power, by renting compute storage, by renting data analytics and machine learning capability that was previously only available to the largest companies globally, massively scaled organizations. Now today, with cloud computing companies such as Azure and AWS, entrepreneurs have the ability to rent that computing power, rent that storage, rent that ability. It's on tap to entrepreneurs. African entrepreneurs can build businesses with just a laptop and an internet connection. This too enables funding opportunities for African entrepreneurs in African countries. And we can see that from this graph, from overcoming Africa's tech startup obstacles, put together by the Boston Consulting Group, we can see that the number of tech startups securing funding in Africa has grown 46% annually versus 8% globally. We can see this exponential shift in funding being allocated towards African entrepreneurs, African companies that can compete at a global level and global scale by renting economies of scale, by renting computing power, by renting all of the things that they might need to build globally successful corporations. The next element I want to speak about is opportunities across the data value chain, from data acquisition, data sourcing, data cleaning, data analysis, data visualization, and building dashboards that enable business leaders to make decisions based on their data. All of this leads to data monetization. African entrepreneurs need to realize that there's been a huge growth in both unstructured and structured data, and data is really the fuel for AI and analytics companies, and indeed the fuel for businesses. No longer is data the exhaust fumes coming from a company's exhaust pipe, but it is today the fuel that's being used to drive companies' growth, to drive decision making that will take companies into the future. We can see from this slide that unstructured data has grown exponentially. And again, this presents many opportunities for entrepreneurs to make sense of this data. How are we going to take decisions based on this data? Indeed, there are opportunities for African entrepreneurs across the entire data analytics value chain, from data acquisition to enriching data, analyzing data, building dashboards and outputs based on data to enable decision makers to take effective decisions based on that data, and even where appropriate to monetize the data as well. This truly is the land of opportunities for African entrepreneurs. The final element I'm going to be speaking about today is that African entrepreneurs need to compete as exponential organizations. We need to be 10 times better, 10 times cheaper, and 10 times faster than our global competitors and counterparts. Exponential organizations leverage technology and they rent scale, and they have a massive transformative purpose. This is something that drives organizations. It cuts beyond 3 and 5 year strategic plans. This is something that African entrepreneurs need in order to really drive them to build businesses that are going to serve their communities, that are going to serve their countries, that are going to serve Africa, and that can be highly successful. And we can see here the different elements of a massive transformative purpose. And we can see that the staff on demand, renting scale, being involved with the community, crowdfunding, algorithms and data, leveraging assets, data being at the heart of the company. And I truly believe that the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. This is a great quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. And if we have a look at both the opportunities and challenges facing entrepreneurs in Africa today, if we believe in the power of unscaling, if we compete across the data value chain, and if we compete as exponential organizations, I believe that we can solve some of the challenges and take advantage of some of the opportunities that this great continent has to offer us. My question to aspiring and African entrepreneurs today is, what is your massive transformative purpose? This massive transformative purpose cuts across 3 and 5 year strategic plans. It's what drives you to get out of bed every morning, to build your vision, to build your company, to service your community, to service your country, and to service your continent, to compete globally. This is what will be at the heart of your organization. It's what differentiates you and enables you to take advantage of some of the opportunities that we presented today, the opportunities of unscaling, the opportunities across the data analytics value chain, and the opportunities of the exponential growth in data. I hope that this presentation encourages you to take advantage of the opportunities that lie before you, to build a business that services your communities, that services your countries, and that places Africa on the map as a global technology hub. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernath, on the inspiring role data analytics can bring to both young and seasoned entrepreneurs in Africa and help digital entrepreneurs reduce carbon footprint and in turn, enhance sustainability. With that in mind, we now move on to our panel, comprised of sustainability leaders from around the globe and in the heart of Kenya itself. With our thought leaders today, we have a few questions that are top of mind to this changing era of governance in ESG. Since we would not be holding a live Q&A session, please feel free to post questions to our thought leaders at info@riskinsights.co.za, and they will return to you in due time. Now please welcome the experienced panel of our experts for our Kenya launch. Jane Mamet, partner at PwC South Africa Sustainability and Climate Change, and an ESG leader for Africa. Ms. Mamet focuses on developing and delivering services in the areas of sustainable development strategy, framework, practices, climate action, and more. Karen Basiye, Head of Sustainability and Social Policy, Safaricom PLC. Simon Wafubwa, Founder and CEO of Nwealth Financial Services Ltd. Dr. Melanie Prinsloo, Director of Infusion Knowledge, Helium AI, and the Center for Democratizing Information, and Afsar Ibrahim, CEO of KIC Advisory Services, Mauritius. So, Ms. Mamet, ESG reporting and disclosure amongst corporations around the globe is in the spotlight. Can you elaborate on how materiality assists impactful reporting and risk management?
So yes, ESG reporting, obviously, like I say, is very much in the spotlight, and ESG is a very broad topic, lots of issues underneath each of those categories and lots of interrelated topics as well. And in terms of when it comes to corporate reporting, you obviously want to have sort of succinct and focused reporting. You can't report on every ESG matter, and not every ESG matter is relevant for your organization. It's very much driven by your industry, your region, your strategy, your competitors, the whole external environment. So in terms of materiality in the ESG space, it's not so much about a financial materiality. It really is looking at what ESG risks, opportunities, or matters will impact your organization's ability to achieve its strategic objectives, to meet its key performance areas, and really to have long-term viability to survive into the future. It also has a slight lens on it in terms of your material impact on others, in terms of your stakeholders in your value chain. So what are the matters actually impact your stakeholders and create or destroy value for them? So it is looking at it with two lenses, but it is very much about honing down ESG into the areas that are relevant to your organization, relevant to your region, relevant to your industry, and not ending up almost with a tick box reporting and disclosure that tries to cover every single issue that's under the ESG agenda, but not making it relevant to your organization. And by having this materiality lens, you very much are able to try and keep the reporting disclosures succinct to a point. Investors, users, readers of reports don't want to read hundreds of pages of reports, that they want to have reports that are easily usable, digestible and readable. So if you focus in on the most material issues, the most relevant issues, the ones that will impact your ability to be successful into the future and to understand the value you have on your stakeholders, then you can have a report that is ring-fenced to the most material issues and not just a tick box or compliance approach.
Thank you, Ms. Mamet. Now, on to Karen Basiye. Ms. Basiye is a sustainable business leader with over 15 years of experience and has worked at the National Environment Management Authority and Safaricom, where she developed competencies in leadership, governance, strategic thinking, sustainability reporting, and more. So, Ms. Basiye, the digital space creates and promotes inclusivity, which is critical to ESG. Earlier, Mr. Bernath from RMB presented how the digital age impacts entrepreneurs and social inclusivity. How do you see the E and S factor impacting the digital age to assist carbon neutrality?
Thank you so much for the question. We get a lot of these questions. Investors are now getting more and more interested not only in returns, but also how the returns are realized. This is the reason why the E and S, that is the environmental and social impact, are critical parameters to measure and monitor. We believe that what gets measured gets controlled and gets managed. So digitization assists in capturing data required for carbon neutrality, environmental data including data on energy used, fuel, travel, among others. While on the social side, we include data on population, gender, health, and above all, how E and S are impacting, so the social impact data. Once data is captured, targets are then set as well as strategies on how to improve and achieve carbon neutrality, and digitization also plays a role in tracking these targets that have been set. If I may use Safaricom as an example, we have set science-based targets to guide us on our journey to carbon neutrality. Our aspiration is to be a net zero company by 2050. That's what we've committed outwardly, but in-house we are working towards being carbon neutral by the year 2030. On the social front, we measure the impact we created on our society through our True Value Report. This considers parameters like financial inclusion, digital inclusion, jobs that we have created, and environmental externalities. So digitization does indeed assist in companies getting to their net zero and carbon neutrality targets. Thank you.
Excellent points, Ms. Wasiya. Hold your thoughts as we circle back to you on the topic. Now, over to Mr. Simon Wafugwa. Mr. Wafugwa oversees the management of a sizable client base, over 120 clients with over 50,000 lives, and has spent much of his career setting up and pioneering change in the social security sector, both the private and public sector in Africa and overseas. He is a member of the Pensions Management Institute of the UK and has worked in senior positions in both local and multinational organizations for over 19 years, giving him a broad and extensive experience in social security financial services consulting. Mr. Wafugwa, impact investing and green funds are increasing exponentially throughout the world. Where is Kenya in terms of impact investing, and what trends are you expecting short to medium term for assets under management?
So thank you again, Risk Insight, for having me here, and congratulations for your launch in Kenya. A warm welcome. Having been in the pension sector in Kenya and East Africa market for a number of years and playing in the country while working with NWEL for 10 years, we've seen phenomenal growth and interest around impact investment. Much as we are at the early stage growth development, the opportunities for scalability remains very high. I say so because environment, social and governance criteria are increasingly popular way for investors to evaluate companies in which they might want to invest. And the flow of capital is taking a key concern in these sectors. Many mutual funds, brokerage firms, and robo-advisors now offer products that employ ESG criteria to allow balance of risk return by various investors who are looking at different counters in our securities exchange. And so I think in terms of trends in the near future, robotics, data analytics is the way to go in the balance of risk, return, and also ideally the whole framework of investment and also reporting to investors. An additional trend we might see is policy shifts as we gain traction, driven by awareness and also necessity to embrace environment conservation and climate change commitment by our government, even to the UNDP goals as well. Thank you. Impact investment is a reality. And thank you, Mr. Wafugwa, for your input. Our next thought leader is Dr. Melanie Prinsloo. Dr. Prinsloo, the concept and learnings of shared value has been taught for decades. Is this a conversation to stakeholder value creations throughout ESG lenses?
Okay,
Very important question on that. And I'm so thankful to be part of this panel for Risk Insights and the important work that they are doing, because they are but one of the stakeholders in creating this value and launching these products throughout our beautiful continent. Where if we do not work together, if we do not bring the thinking together that gives people guidance on how to make this ESG impact, nobody's going to do that on their own. A beautiful other example of also stakeholders coming together is a product I'm currently looking at of an insurance company that has at last launched a product that insures poorer people living in informal settlements against fire. I mean, previously we said that is impossible in that the insurance company would lose too much. But this company have come together with an NGO that focuses on fire, with a digital company that focuses on the technology and the alarm systems and the linking to the most pervasive technology being mobile phones, and then the insurance company in terms of the risk analysis of that. And together they are launching a product that potentially can protect people's upward mobility, where we do then have a stronger society coming out of this pandemic, where more people are able to participate in normal economic opportunities that is usually excluded from. So I would absolutely agree with you that it is about stakeholder value creation, and where we have a similarity in our value system that says we have to make this part of the DNA of our organizations. We have to get our employees to think in that line. We have to incentivize innovation that is in line with ESG principles, so therefore bringing more awareness around ESG specifically. And this product that Risk Insights is launching, I mean, we can't ask for something more important at this point in time.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Prinsloo. On to our last, but certainly not least, introduction of our panel speakers, Mr. Afsar Ibrahim. Mr. Ibrahim has over a quarter century of experience in corporate mergers and acquisitions, strategy and financial consulting, and fundraising to clients across a wide spectrum of industries, both locally and internationally. Mr. Ibrahim, Europe, and to some extent America, through the Biden administration, have and are implementing ESG extensively to protect the planet through reducing carbon emissions. This may result in punitive measures to companies and countries that have not caught up with this responsibility. Africa, as a whole, has been slow to respond to climate change risk, which can affect our competitiveness on goods and services produced. Do you think we can play catch up? And if yes, how?
Well, first of all, I don't think you can paint 54 countries with just one brush. I don't entirely share the views that we are playing catch up, because you can't say that the whole of Africa is playing catch up on ESG and within that in all its aspects. ESG framework is a relatively new concept in terms of a framework, but the values that ESG prevail has always been around African companies. They may not have been in a structured manner, but they have been applying them for decades now. You see, the ESG framework is very structured, but the values existed well before. Especially you need to take into account that businesses in Africa has primarily been private companies and family holdings. And the values of those families have always been very close to the issue of governance and to the issue of sustainability in some form or fashion. They may not have been exactly as per the structure which we have today, but they have existed. So it's nothing new. And you also have to realize that Africa, a lot of companies have been involved in export manufacturing. And those manufacturing companies have been dealing with OECD's large retail players. And these have always been very, very demanding in terms of supply chain. And in that respect, especially issues concerning child labor and the conditions of labor have been very high on the agenda. And the supply chain have always pushed those manufacturing companies into getting their act together. And if you look at it today, the manufacturing has been probably the pioneers in sustainability over the years. Regarding climate change, on this count, probably African businesses have to play catch up when you take into account that some of the large economies are very big in fossil fuels and in coal supplies. But by and large, today they have embraced solar energy and it's one of the fastest growing in Africa. And you also have to take into account that technology has played a big role in ensuring that the gap between Africa and European countries have come down. More so, the affordability of Chinese technology have played a big part in ensuring that the gap is closing very fast. Like I said, you can't just paint the whole of Africa. Some countries have done better than others, and the governance across the continent has improved. On environmental issues, people are very conscious, but there has always been a challenge in terms of trade-off, because there's also the economic reality, there's also the fight against poverty, and sometimes some of these have conflicted with the values of ESG. But by and large today, most countries in Africa have embraced better governance, and the companies within those frameworks have played a major role in raising the bar when it comes to sustainability and environment protection.
This is certainly a journey, and thank you for your insights, Mr. Ibrahim. We have some time, so let me use this opportunity to extract some leadership gems from our panel. Ms. Basiye, disclosure on corporation strategies for carbon neutrality is becoming critical. How is Kenyan corporations responding to this? What are the trends and challenges experienced?
So we have seen a number of companies reporting on their carbon emissions through their sustainability reports. We've seen carbon disclosures, including Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, where corporations have direct control of these emissions. And we are seeing a new trend where corporations are also extending to Scope 3 emissions, which include supply chain emissions. So for instance, we are seeing also a shift in how companies are doing their logistics and supply chain. For instance, we are seeing companies moving from air freight to sea freight so that they're able to ship things, because shipping has lower Scope 3 emissions. So from the emissions reported, corporations have developed strategies and actions to reduce their emissions. This includes energy reduction, energy efficiency measures, deployment of renewable energy solutions, and strategies that can influence supply chain to reduce their emissions. So ESG reporting still remains voluntary in Kenya, and many progressive companies report either as part of their annual reports or standalone sustainability reports. In the last year, we've seen many more companies taking up sustainability reporting, carbon disclosures, and slowly we are seeing this becoming a trend where the big companies as well as the SMEs are doing this. There are three main challenges though. The first challenge when we talk to these companies around is buy-in from leadership. So many companies need their leadership to buy into this carbon neutrality so that, or sustainability also, so that they can start the journey. The other one is in data collection, because if you look at many corporations, data sits within different teams in the company. So there's a lot of coalescing and bringing data and training. Then there's knowledge gaps on carbon strategies. So as a Safaricom, we started the journey of being net zero like 2-3 years back. So we've offered ourselves in partnership with 2 other companies to help companies that want to start this journey. And this is quite timely for us because of COP26, the Climate Change Conference of Parties 26 that is happening in the month of November. So in the month of November, as Safaricom and our partners, we will be launching a 10-point carbon neutrality guide for businesses, and we've offered ourselves to help other businesses join us on this journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Basiye. Mr. Wafubwa, Alpha is based on risk appetite and returns. Do you see ESG being formulated into Alpha going forward?
So ESGs are companies that embrace ESG in their investments. I think it's all over proven that they deliver much higher and superior returns to their investors. Recently, we had Safaricom launching the sustainability report, and Safaricom in our stock market in Kenya has continued to deliver decent returns. And this is because of its commitment from a sustainability perspective, right from the governance perspective, looking at also the social commitment, accountability to various stakeholders, that Safaricom embraces. I'm using this Safaricom as just an example in Kenya. And so we see in the near future risk-adjusted returns that embrace ESGs in our sector, while at the same time entrenching ESG objectives in our investment policies and developing appropriate benchmarks that respond to the risk appetites of the investors that are looking at counters that embrace ESG.
The cost of capital is a sure element to keep a finger on the pulse for corporations. Thank you, Mr. Wafubwa. Ms. Mamet, what are the global standards being recommended for reporting on ESG, and how is Africa faring in this regard?
So over the last 20 years or so of reporting on ESG matters or sustainability matters, obviously the terminology's changed over the last couple of decades. There's been a plethora of reporting standards to guide companies on what to report, how to report, when to report, etc. One of the first ones to come into existence was the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, which started probably about 20 years ago. But in the later decade, we've had the SASB report, or the SASB standards. We've got the TCFD, which is the Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures. We've got the CDP, which is perhaps more of a framework. But essentially, there's been a whole plethora of standards, frameworks, guidelines to guide companies. And to be honest, it's become a bit of a mixed bag. Lots of almost standard setters almost competing with each other, and it's really got quite confusing for the preparers of reports and the users of reports as to what are the right standards, what's the right information to report. So fortunately, what we've seen in during 2021 is very much a move to a set of global standards. We've had the SASB has merged with the Integrated Reporting Framework to become the Value Reporting Framework, and the IFRS Foundation, who traditionally guides obviously financial reporting, is looking at setting up a sustainability standards board later this year to really try and pull together a global set of standards. Very much a welcome move. It was getting very confusing. Still a little bit of uncertainty as to what the standards will be or who will drive it and make it work. But I think there's a great commitment and energy to move to these global standards to take out a lot of the noise in reporting, so that it helps companies and it helps the users into what they're reading. In terms of Africa, I think a lot of companies have used the GRI, particularly in South Africa, where I am. GRI has been a very big favourite of the companies, but SASB has also begun to sort of take a lot of interest from companies as well, and being quite useful. But I think across the continent, other frameworks have been used, and it's still evolving across the continent in terms of the whole ESG reporting standards. So I think it'd be quite nice for Africa, as these global set of standards come into play over the next year or so, to actually pick up on those standards. And perhaps avoid the confusion that's built up in the market over the last 20 years.
Thank you, Ms. Mamet. It's great to have leadership and corporations with audit firms working closely to save humanity. Mr. Ibrahim, there are new business opportunities for job creation through the circular economy. How can ESG be seen as an opportunity for job creation and influence the circular economy?
See, the opportunity for circular economy is huge. All we need is a business-friendly policy framework, regulatory framework. And the next thing we require is also a logistic to be able to take care of the circular economy, especially regarding papers and plastics. The financial viability, I think, is a no-brainer. But what we need to get right in Africa is the process. We need a process which is seamless and business-friendly. For example, plastics can well become raw materials to all the plastic products. Used metal can become billets, all textiles can become fabrics, and papers can become carton boxes. It's part of achieving the famous 3 Ps, where businesses look after the people, the planet, and the profits. Job will get created, the environment gets protected, and the value is created in terms of economic benefits. I think the people are well aware of this, and especially that you can perpetually recycle all the finished products into raw materials. It's a never-ending game, and the value is huge. I think the African businesses are well poised to take advantage of these opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim. Picking up from shared value creations, Dr. Prinsloo, what are your views on corporations and public sectors playing a crucial role in shaping societies? How can ESG help shape a country from a socio-economic perspective?
A very, very important question, and something that we have to take the time to work through and to get the parties together. I mean, if you look at the ESG challenge, it is not something that a single party is going to be able to solve. So the intersection between where we take our public partners and we look at our private partners would be an important one to figure out. And honestly, I do believe that if we use an ESG lens in bringing that together, that can be quite profound and make a lot of difference for the future. Imagine we sit in a situation where public sector focuses a lot of their research budgets on ESG related aspects and challenges in our societies, where they focus on, for example, water shortages and how we address water shortages. How do we create more inclusive markets going forward with more affordable things for customers? How we use technology in better ways? How we address a lot of the things related to pollution? And if we can have very good research coming out of the public sector, funded by the public sector on that, and public sector takes hands with private sector in terms of the commercialization, where we realize that markets is a force that can take companies forward. And it's not just a case of for profit, but where the company starts realizing it's not about your market share. A market share is such a simple term to say, what is my part of this slice, my slice of this market, that's my market share. But what if we can make larger markets? What if creating larger markets with better designed, more inclusive products that is in line with the ESG principles? What if that could be an answer to a better future? And where this interplay then between public funded research and the commercialization of companies of these ideas can create markets that is truly inclusive. We use the word inclusive as if it's a very simple term, but it is actually very complex. And we do have to make sure that when we are designing inclusive markets, that it is in line with a better future for the planet and for humans going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Prinsloo. That is all the time we have for our leaders. We thank you for the insights. Should you have any further questions for our panel or speakers, kindly email your queries to our email in the description box below. We look forward to engaging with you further. With that, I would like to bring your attention to our closing and very special speaker, Ms. Suzanne Ellers from the Malala Fund. Suzanne works in partnership with co-founders Malala and Ziauddin Yousafzai and the Board Leadership Council, staff, education champions, and the girls activists to create a more equal world by making sure all girls can go to school. This is such an initiative to enrich the next generation with opportunities that they could never have gotten due to their circumstances. Risk Insights founder believes strongly in women empowerment and works closely with the fund to promote girls to receive an education. As we launch ESG GPS into the continent, and for everyone in Kenya's launch of ESG GPS to help make the world a better place, Risk Insights will donate $2,000 to Malala to help make a difference to girls going to school. Join me in welcoming Ms. Ellers.
Thank you, Risk Insights, for the generous introduction and for allowing us to be a part of your endeavor here. My name is Suzanne Ellers. I serve as CEO of Malala Fund, and I'm pleased to be here to talk about the work that we're doing around the world to help girls learn and lead. With 130 million girls out of school, we're doing everything we can to break down the barriers that keep girls from accessing the education they deserve. Malala Fund does this in a couple of ways. First and foremost, we invest in local champions, those who are on the front lines of making impact in their communities. We believe that locally led efforts are the most effective and impactful way to really advance the agenda for girls' education. We also elevate the voice of girls. We know that they are change makers in their own right, and we put them on our digital platforms and our newsletters like Assembly, and we make sure that they're helping us guide strategic decisions that we're making on their behalf about their education. And lastly, we do advocacy, policy change and advocacy, lifting up the voices of all of our champions, but also of our co-founders, Malala and Ziauddin Yousafzai. These three pillars constitute Malala Fund's work because we believe in girls' education as a basic human right, and we also believe in it because it improves public health. It helps prevent conflict and wars. It has been a mitigating impact in the COVID battle. And importantly, it contributes essentially to economic productivity. We believe that we're leaving more than $30 trillion on the floor if we don't engage in girls' education and 12 years of free, safe, and high-quality education. Risk Insights, we're so grateful to you for the generous partnership and for giving us this opportunity to build awareness and to raise the visibility of girls' education as an essential issue in human development and human rights. If you want to learn more, I invite you to visit malala.org. We can talk about the countries where we work and the amazing champions that we lift up. Again, Suzanne Ehlers, as CEO of Malala Fund, thank you for the work and the partnership and for the collaboration in support of girls' education around the world. And Risk Insights, I believe that you have a Malala Fund video that if you'll show right now, I think it will give viewers a chance to better understand the work of our Education Champion Network. It's those local education activists who are really on the front lines of making change and making impact. And this beautiful video gives you a little bit of insight into work that they do. Thanks so much.
Malala Fund is the voice of girls. The goal of the fund is to see every girl in school for 12 years of a safe, quality education. There seems to be a view that basic literacy and numeracy is enough. But it's not enough for me or for my friends, nor for the children of any politician I meet. The Malala Fund is just starting our story. But we are already seeing incredible impact. We are funding leaders and projects on the ground in the developing countries. We are helping girls who would otherwise really struggle to go to school. Secondary education is the basic human right of every girl. There's so much to do. I won't stop until every girl can go to school.
Thank you for joining the ESG revolution in Africa, and let us all strive together to bring Africa's drive towards sustainability a reality in more African countries. Further details are available on Risk Insights website, social media, and via email. All the links and handles are in the description box below. Thank you for tuning in, and expect to hear more on Africa's first AI model for ESG, ESG GPS, for Africa, by Africans. Thank you.